A package marked Return to Sender by Manen Lyset. My neighbour is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself in lukewarm water, all while screaming, "Epic win, epic fail," or, fuck, epic maintenance of the status quo, for all I know. It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So, when he knocked on my door the other day, told me that he was going away for a few weeks, and asked that I can get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and what I could only assume was a birthday card. Then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. In big red letters was written, "Return to Sender." I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really frickin' heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realised there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs through my front door. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit that refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down while I struggled to open the tricky door, but you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something. No point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hoped I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbour about it and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands-free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over me. I dragged the box in the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbour would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it. Until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure exactly how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly sweet odour similar to a skunk, and for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realised that the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went looking for a source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odour knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit was hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire frickin' cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. But I wasn't about to poke my finger into spoiled meat juices. That soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat one garbage bag at a time and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit, and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled that scent mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit that I ran out of the door for a breath of fresh air. but in the short time I'd spent in the garage, the smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared, a clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. As it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbour, dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with a corpse in his garage, after all. Thankfully, they soon realised I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box. The smell might have left a mark throughout my house. But there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbour's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not sure if they were allowed to, or if they felt so bad for me they figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbour was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off for shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbour recorded a few short clips about his progress. I think I'm in a truck now. I can feel it moving. Must be in a warehouse. Pretty warm here, and still got plenty of food. That kind of stuff. And then, on the last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door. The Mount Robson Disappearances. In the summer of 2006, 2 groups of tourists took to the now closed hiking trail up Mount Robson in British Columbia. What resulted was one of the strangest cases of missing persons in the province's history. As the son of one of the hikers who went up that day, I've naturally wanted to find out exactly what happened. Long after the investigation closed, I continued to search for answers. This is what I discovered based on eyewitness testimony, police records, and meteorological data. The day started off a little chilly for that time of year, but not chilly enough to be considered dangerous. The tour guide separated the hikers into 2 groups, Group A, the fast group, and Group B, the leisurely group, which was a diplomatic way of saying they were slow. My mother, an avid hiker, was put into Group A. There was supposedly a running gag between the guides that whoever reached the summit last had to wear these embarrassing neon green socks on their next excursion, but to make things fair, would get to lead the faster group next time. At least that's how they explained the very unfashionable socks worn by the leader of Group A that day. Both groups were estimated to reach the summit by noon, with Group A scheduled to arrive about an hour ahead of Group B. Each group had 2 walkie-talkies for safety reasons. The hike itself was supposed to be fairly safe, taking the scenic route on multiple occasions to avoid potential danger spots. There was only one way up and only one way down. Group A quickly took to the trail while Group B lagged behind. They made it about 2/3 of the way up when my mother slipped on a mossy rock and sprained her ankle. One of the guides got on a walkie-talkie and contacted Group B, who was carrying the first aid kit. At that point, Group B was a little under half an hour behind. Not wanting to ruin their reputation of being the fastest, Group A insisted on going ahead without my mum. They left her by the trail with one of the guides and their extra walkie-talkie, then resumed their hike. The temperature was getting much more comfortable by that point, so the guide and my mum didn't have to take any special measures to stay warm while they waited for Group B to catch up. For the next half an hour, everyone stayed in contact using their respective walkie-talkies. Everything seemed fine. Group B eventually caught up to my mum. As they were tending to her ankle, they called ahead to Group A to check on their progress. At that point in time, they had almost reached the summit. Now, once she was patched up, my mum could have chosen to turn around and go back down the mountain with her guide, but she chose to keep going with the slower group. I guess she really wanted to see the summit. This is where things get weird. At approximately 10:55 a.m., a sudden increase in temperature and atmospheric pressure was reported. Based on the meteorological data, there was a spike of approximately 15 degrees Celsius that dissipated by the time the devices conducted their next check. This is just an educated guess, but that means it lasted somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. Now, to be fair, Environment Canada's meteorological services deemed the spike to be a glitch, but many people in the surrounding area did in fact report feeling a sudden but temporary wave of heat at around the same time. What followed was a low atmospheric rumble that sounded similar to thunder in that it seemed to reverberate through the sky, but with a softer, less fluctuating tone. There were no storm clouds at the time, and no planes were reported in the area. Despite this, Group B continued their trek up the mountain with my mum in tow. When they reached the summit, they found themselves alone. They could see Group A's tracks all the way up to the summit, but they ended there. No tracks going down, no signs of going over the edge, no signs of them anywhere. The guides tried contacting Group A on the walkie-talkie, but never received a response. It was assumed their walkie-talkie had run out of batteries, and since my mother and the guide had been left with their only spare, they hadn't been able to reply. Investigators assumed they'd gotten lost in the woods and never made it to the summit at all, that the tracks found were all from Group B. Whatever the case, 15 hikers went missing that day and were never found. I often ask my mum to tell me her side of the story, to clue me in on any detail I might have missed or things that hadn't been reported, but she refuses to talk about it. She'll either change the subject or stare off blankly into space until I shut up, which is really abnormal for my mum. There is only one other thing that has ever solicited that kind of response of her: the feet. In 2007, feet, mostly left feet, started washing up on the shores of British Columbia. No one knows where they're from or who they belong to, but they've been periodically showing up. Severed feet, still wearing their running shoes. Go ahead and look it up if you want. It's one of those really bizarre, unsolved mysteries you rarely hear about. When my mum hears about them, she goes quiet as the grave. You wouldn't think those feet would be related to this story in any way. Mount Robson is on the east side of British Columbia, far inland, bordering Alberta. You wouldn't think there'd be any connection. But you also wouldn't think that many people wear high-end hiking boots with bright neon green socks, like the one that washed up on shore last week. I just want to thank Manen and Lyset for allowing me to narrate those stories. I thought I'd do a 2-for-1 deal for you there, so there's 2 stories from Manen and Lyset. If you liked what you heard here, head over to their Reddit page, show them some love. I'll leave a link for the original stories in the description below. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare.